You know the phrase small but mighty? Well, that is the perfect description of these spider mites. You can barely see them until they have completely taken over. Hey guys, I'm Audrey from Audrey's Little Farm, and I help passion-driven people trailblaze their way to a more self-sufficient life. So the other day I came out to check on my garden, and I thought I noticed a few cobwebs on my tomato plants, and it seemed a little bit strange, but overall my plants looked healthy, and so I really didn't think much of it. But boy was I wrong. I came back only a couple days later to an insane infestation. The entire plant and all the surrounding tomato plants were completely covered in what appears to be cobwebs, and all the leaves had turned to a dusty pale color. In years past, I don't remember ever having this issue, so I quickly did some research and came to the conclusion that it was in fact spider mites. They are named as one of the most destructive hot season pests, especially for tomato plants. And to top it off, they thrive in hot and dry conditions, which is not really a surprise that they showed up this year because our summer has been a brutal one. So of course my first thoughts were how to save the plants. But after reading multiple articles, this is the conclusion I came to. And that is that nothing works when populations are dense and the weather is hot and dry. The best solution is destruction of the infected plants, and then to definitely eliminate all plants before planting your fall garden. It really felt like those articles were written directly to me because at the time of this recording, we're at the end of August. I'm still getting some harvest from my other vegetables, but overall I'm really just planning for my fall garden. Which means I definitely don't want to go into the fall gardening season with a pest problem. So it looks like now we're going to be tearing out these tomato plants. I'm definitely thankful that this happened towards the end of the gardening season because it makes it less upsetting having to tear out the tomato plants. But now what's important is figuring out how to prevent these spider mites for next year's garden. I believe dealing with pests in the garden is the least fun part of gardening. In fact, I kind of hate it. And so every year I add more and more preventative practices so that I can hopefully avoid the pests altogether. But what's funny is tomatoes are not really that prone to pests. Of course, we all know about the tomato hornworm. But other than that, I've never even really tried to prevent pests around my tomato plants. As far as everything else in the garden, I plant marigolds and herbs all throughout my plants, and then I do daily checks, and if I see any bugs, I spray them off with a garden hose. But if the bugs seem to get too out of control, I immediately treat them with a safe insecticidal spray, or I sprinkle the plants with diatomaceous earth. The plants I have sort of overlooked on a daily basis are my tomatoes, and obviously that will not be the case going forward. One of the methods for preventing spider mites that I'm most excited about is thoroughly applying a seaweed spray twice a week to my tomato plants. Up until doing all this research on spider mites, I never even looked into seaweed extract, but it only took me a few minutes of reading great reviews to convince me to buy. Liquid seaweed is an organic fertilizer with more than 70 minerals, vitamins, and enzymes that could be used on your vegetables, flower beds, lawns, and houseplants. Talk about killing one bird with two stones, right? It's used to promote root growth, it boosts your yields, it helps your plants grow healthier, but most importantly, especially for the context of this video, it also helps deter pests. The other method for preventing spider mites is to simply do daily checks. The mites lay their eggs on the underside of the leaves, and so every day check your tomato plants, and if you happen to see any eggs or mites themselves, spray them off with a water hose. If you keep up on this, hopefully they shouldn't get too out of hand. It's very likely that you'll be facing a spider mite infestation towards the middle or end of a hot summer. And if that's the case, it might just be time for a garden cleanup. So be sure to join me in this next video where I explain situations where your best bet is actually to just tear out plants, and then I go over which crops can be replanted for an extra harvest.